welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Hello, hello, hello. It's an honor to be back with you, uh, healthier every day, able to speak a little bit longer. For those of you who have gone through your challenges, you know what I'm talking about. The most important thing is that we get through those challenges, and ideally, we get through those challenges together. Here at Lead Live, we're all about reminding people of their capacity to be the executive, the chief executive of their own lives. Of course, as children, we really rely on the elders around us if we're so fortunate, definitely the adults around us if we're also fortunate, who are healthy, responsible, to guide us, to enable us to experience increasingly more of who we are in terms of all of our faculties, our mental faculties at the conscious and subconscious level, our heartfelt connection to all of life itself. In fact, that's the first thing that we walk into this space and we experience as little babies. We feel, we sense, we smell, we touch, we hear. We have all kinds of sensations in reaction to the world around us. And then over time, we understand that we can actually respond. Responding is a reflection of using one's critical faculties at whatever level to decide. And deciding assumes one is exercising their critical faculties at whatever levels, in whatever context. And when we get to the place where we are choosing based upon knowing some of our options, and we typically don't know all of our options, knowing some of our options, then all of a sudden we have a clue that there's something that we could aspire to. We don't know what we don't know until we know that. That's pretty obvious, right, folks? And the power of what we do here at Lead Live, Leadership Excellence and Achievement on Demand, is reminding us all that we get to grow, which means we're experiencing more, we're reading more, that's helpful, we're doing more, that's transformative, and then all of a sudden we know more because we've had the experience, good, better, and different, yet we marshaled our efforts and we walked through those experiences, however we did it. We got on the other side and realized, wow, seemed traumatic initially. I got through it stronger than I thought it was. Oh, that was a piece of cake. And then we look at ourselves in the mirror and said, oh, no, it wasn't, but now it feels like it because we're on the other side. Or it was a simple exercise and there was no extreme to it, trauma or anything else related. It was a little bit of chaos. You got through it. The key thing is living in the present, certainly planning for the future, understanding the past has its place as a way to inform and educate us, especially if we honor the facts of the past rather than just constantly recreate things that one knows is a figment of their own imagination. It's great to imagine the future. Heck, it's great to imagine the present and bring it into the present. We challenge ourselves, and I would suggest we typically waste too much time, but this is my level of understanding. As I continue to increase my level of understanding, I may learn more about the power of the past. For now, I recognize that that's what it is. And what's happening now is a present. We are fortunate to be in the now. And then there's some of us who believe that the past, the future coexist with the present now. that time itself is an illusion of our creation. And we've created it in order to rationalize this life, to make sense of things, in order to move in some logical, sequential way. And so we have challenges with those who don't. Those who seek a level of freedom that throws us off course and say, what the heck are they doing? They're not following a traditional path. That's not the way we do things. And then they are in different spaces to really chart a new course, to help us understand that there's more than one direction to get to the same end, that level of freedom. There's more than one path to get to a level of freedom that we all seek. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. There is your path, and your path may be comparable to many other people's path, including my own. It may be qualitatively different. Yet the power of our topic today is to recognize that as we grow to develop into who we are now, we have the capacity to experience different levels of freedom. We really do. That child who's in the care of whether it's a foster care system like I was, where I didn't belong to anyone, or whether they're in the care of folks who absolutely adore them and protect them and support them, or they're in the care of whomever or whatever. That child is inherently, innately gifted with all kinds of capacity. And if that child, if she, if he, if they decide to leverage that, there are no what's the right word I'm looking for? There are no barriers that are sufficiently insurmountable that will thwart that child from actualizing it. So today's topic is freedom, a path to achieving it. And it's part one in our September series. I know it's the end of August, but as my team reminded me, this September is a September that we want you to remember. And we want folks to remember that all of us can chart a path to a level of freedom that works for us. I understand there are real constraints out there. I understand. I could hear some of the messaging when people look at this. What are you talking about? She has no clue. Where's she reared in the U.S.? I don't care if she was, raised in the streets or in foster care or whatever she was. She had a good life. Where are we on the planet? And we don't even have households. I get you. I don't know your experiences, and I don't know the level of challenges you have to face. What I do know, because of many lives I've studied, I've observed, and I've had the opportunity to be influenced by and to influence, I know there are no obstacles that any one of us cannot get beyond, at least at a particular level that we're going to talk about, that is more profound than what appears to be very profound. So what am I talking about, to cut to the chase? I'm talking about a freedom that really is internal. And I'm not talking about the freedom that a lot of us focus on that's external. When one charts a path of internal freedom, it really doesn't matter what's happening outside. Yes, I understand. Systems, no matter what the systems are, structures, values, cultures come to play and impact people's capacity to feel like they can experience freedom. And yet that may be the very set of challenges that we ourselves have come here to experience as humans, spirits in human physical structures, in order to remember from which we came. what we're part of really and who we are at our core. I have a daily messaging that I created for myself. It is my vision statement, and I made it basically part of my meditation. It's not long, it's less than 10 minutes. I listen to it every morning before I go to sleep, in addition to a meditative, um, powerful instrument, I'll say, that allows me to do whatever I want to do when I'm in my sleep. I used to do that as a child, not knowing what I was doing. Now I'm intentional as an adult. Yet I did as a child as a defense mechanism, most people thought. I'm so pleased that I did it because what it did was allow me to remember where I came from, what I'm a part of, and what I'll return to when I leave this temple that I'm so fortunate to be part of. So, the topic today is give me a moment. I'm getting ahead of myself. Freedom, a path to achieving it. Freedom, a path to achieving it. What is freedom? What does it mean to you? Liberation to be, to act, or to do, or liberation from something? Some release from something. What is freedom to you? To be. What is that to be for you? So let me share some thoughts, some initial thoughts, as you hopefully are thinking about your path to achieving it, how to experience freedom. Always ask people to first define what it is they say they're interested in. Doesn't matter what it is, so that they're clear for themselves, not for me, not for someone else. In this case, what does freedom mean to you? And I threw it in those three buckets: to be, to do, or to act, or freedom from something external. So the first is purely internal, to be who one is. The next is we leverage who we are to act accordingly. And the third is there's systems, there's events, there's people, there's conditions that we want to be free from. So let's talk about the first, to be. How do you define freedom? What does the word freedom mean to you? Liberation to be? What is it that to be means to you? To be one's unique self, who we were meant to be? For example, a creative. And I think of creatives in so many different spaces: artists, actors. First person that came to mind was Denzel Washington, and his wife with him, who doesn't get a lot of airtime. Brilliant, genius. And then, of course, his children. I think of Denzel Washington because how he chooses the parts that he plays, how he chooses, how he evidence those characters on camera, in films, in movies. Then I think about designers, whether it's Giorgio Armani, Alessandro, Alazat, Alasa, Alessandro Michele, singer actor Diana Ross, Michael Jackson. So many images come to mind. I'm mentioning certain names. I want those images to strike you. Dancer, Sammy Davis Jr. Performer, oh my God, I got to see him at Stanford University Lives on in a meadow on the grass. Miles Davis. Wow. He performed with his back to us, and I don't think any of us cared. The pure artistry, the fact that you didn't know when the instrument began or in his body, in his self, they were one, they were in sync. And then he performed with his complement And there was a point where there was a blurred line between him, his instrument, and then one of his performers and himself. It's almost like they were one. I mean, energetically, there was no, they did an improvisation that I wish I had on video. It still wouldn't capture the energetic force that just emitted from that whole environment. Creatives. And if you never heard him speak, his level of intelligence about the basic, the mundane, and the absolute profound and abstract. Think about engineers, architects, builders, scientists. Luis Miramontes, he was one of the chemists and other scientists. If he didn't invent or find a key ingredient, I don't know if you could invent anything, everything already exists. He helped to facilitate then the use of ingredients that were used for the first 3 oral contraceptives. Now, for many people, so what? We don't need them because women should not have the right to abort any entity that's growing in her body, whether it's 2 days old because of a rape or because of molestation or because of something else horrific. And yet that genius, Luis Miramontes, was instrumental. He took his genius to a level in Mexico in order to facilitate so many countless women, their husbands, their brothers, their fathers, to help these children and then women and even moms be able to address some major issues so they wouldn't create more major issues. Katherine Johnson. We know her because of the movie Human Computer, as she was referenced, along with so many other Black women. These mathematical geniuses, she was definitely one. She just died recently, in 2020? And she was born in 1918. She literally, her mathematical calculations of orbitable mechanics as a NASA employed were critical to the success of the first and subsequent U.S. crewed space flights. In fact, one of the famous astronauts would not even go up, said, "We're not going anywhere without her giving us the data, because she's the only one we trust." Ultimately, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2015, and NASA dedicates a facility to mathematicians now. So again, see Hidden Figures movie. Might be illuminating for those who have no clue. There's so many countless people who are creatives out there, and they're in different roles. And most of us have no clue who they are. Some of us do know because they're in our households, they're loved ones, and they just over and over, they're looking to come up with something genius as a work of art. And someone, hopefully when they're alive, but too often when they transition. Think of Charles White. Oh my God. Some of his original work that were then, it was work created on top of that because he didn't have enough paper to be able to sell his goods, are multi-million dollar pieces of extraordinary art. I can think of a number. In fact, I can visualize some of them because I saw them years ago. And I know, or I knew, because he's deceased, one of the gentlemen who bought a lot of stuff from him for almost nothing. Then I think about athletes, whether it's a Tiger Woods, who opened up the vista for so many youth, Asian, Black, Latino, Indian, and others who could not previously see themselves on that, I call it, playing ground. So what did he do? In 1997, when Tiger won the Masters at the age of 21, the number of rounds played on U.S. golf courses increased by 63 million over the previous year. He brought youth, style, athleticism, like the game had had never seen before. There's so many others. And if I said their names, you're like, of course, he's now a billionaire. Of course, of course, of course. Serena Williams. You know where this young lady with her siblings, her parents, and other loved ones grew up? Not too far from where I grew up as a kid. One of the places I lived in. They were in Compton. I was in South Central Los Angeles, just next door. And the kind of nonsense they had to deal with. The movie that came out is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that their dad, that they, we won't talk about all that. That's for them to share more if they choose to share more. But the powerful thing is that Serena Williams and her sister Venus Williams took tennis to a level it had never experienced before. Initially, there was all this hoopla around who do these little kids think they are? And worse off, who does their father think he is, manipulating us, etc. He wasn't doing anything that many other parents do routinely, but because he was Black and because of where he was coming from. And this bombastic talk, so as it was described, was considered to be negating, and then he was already Black, so that was negating enough. So who do these people think they are? But what these two young ladies did, they leveraged the genius of both parents, the love of the rest of the family, and the growing community, because all the community wasn't behind them initially. Let's be clear, because it was unusual. They leveraged what they could leverage, and they focused, they followed one course until they were successful. They did that. I mean, success was more than just predictability, as was made certain. It was more than just hard work, patience, sacrifice. It was an understanding. It was a visioning. It was an imagining. And it was an unwavering practice, repetition, learning the best, learning from the best, and moving forward. So what did they do? They enhanced the nature of the sport itself. Again, still youthful, this brilliant woman, Serena's legacy in particular, now revered as the greatest of all times. Now, I got to stay here for a moment because I remember feeling her. I remember imagining myself in her and being so particularly proud of her. Yes, she's younger than me. She's 40. I think about now I'll be 64 in a less than 2 months. And I remember imagining that special child, and her sister is a special child, and their siblings, like all children, special. And the oppressive, harmful statements about Serena's Williams' physique, about the color of her skin, about the nature of her hair, about the audacity of her wearing certain clothes, about the beautiful muscles, or the beauty is my perspective, about stuff that people go and get operations to look like, and they're not Black. And some increasingly Black are doing it too. It's kind of weird. What she did was honor who she is. She chose to be. Yes, this is about freedom, folks. She chose to be who she is, who she imagined herself to be, to leverage the difficulties, the challenges, to plow right through them. She didn't run away. She could have. Probably wanted to, at least once. Her reaction, the level of dignity, humanity, she helped the rest of us who might have been insecure for whatever reason about our hair, our natural hair, about the clothes we opt to wear, about our own voices, let alone physical presence. When there was something wrong in terms of a rule, she didn't just take it like most folks do, independent of the color of their skin, especially if they're female, historically. She asked the questions. Well, why? Just because it's historically been does not mean it is absolutely appropriate for the sport. She questioned. More importantly, she backed it up with performance. She backed it up with a regimented investment in preparation for the successes that exceed anyone previously. The iconic figures from all over the creative industry and beyond are like pure genius. And she was fortunate to be sufficiently open as part of her being to allow herself to experience relationships with people that she was able to leverage as trainers, as coaches, as mentors, to allow herself to enhance the nature and quality of her loved experiences with family, to allow herself to find, to draw to her, to welcome in a husband who could honor her 100% as she is because she first honored herself fully. And she could attract someone who honors himself fully. The power of being is much more than just, okay, my hair is, so I'm going to wear it like that, or my face is, so I'm going to show it as it is, or I'm going to wear these clothes. It is about knowing who you are at the core. What do I want to achieve? What do I want to do? And then passionately, with an unwavering force, engaging and making it happen. She, along the way, inspired countless females and males to not only participate in tennis, but to lead in other spaces. And so, fast forward, what is she called now? The greatest of all times? Remind you of anyone? Muhammad Ali? He was telling us before anyone else told him. Everyone else was telling he just talks too much. He needs to be quiet. He needs to shut up. And then, oh my goodness, he comes out and he says, I'm not going to what? Be a con? I'm not going to go shoot up people who never did anything to me. And I'm in a country where I have no full rights. He stood up. He spoke authentically. He changed his name. And folks, didn't matter what their color was, their ethnicity, their culture. We're all kind of negating him. Like, what? You're Cassius Clay. Get a clue. Commanded respect. He didn't have to fight everybody to get respect. In fact, what did he do? He go to jail, go to prison. It's all about living authentically. When you understand who you are at your core, or you're developing a greater understanding, you don't need to waver. What you do is you continue to learn, you continue to grow, you continue to move forward. And as you experience hiccups, you try to understand its utility, its purpose in your life, and you just can continue to go. The greatest of all times. Sports reporters are saying that, journalists are saying that. People who know they had no space, no room for her, were vying to get to these various events where she showed not just her athleticism, but her pure genius. Can you imagine all of us living the genius we are, not aspire to be someone else's genius, and live our own? What would this planet look like? Is that our purpose as humans? To go beyond the obvious? What if we were all living our genius? What if we were all being who we are, the healthiest part of our core? How much more value would we experience across the planet? How soon would climate change be addressed? How soon would water would be clean and available to be ubiquitous? How soon with a set of values that unite all humans, just almost instantaneous. How soon would we remember that at the core of who we are is not who we think we are? Who do we think we are? Really? Oh, my name, I'm Dr. Webb. Oh, my birth certificate says baby girl Mitchell, so I'm baby girl Mitchell. Oh, my family name is Enriquez Moat. Oh, my great grandmother is from India with African roots. And on another side of my father's side, they're from Cuba, but really Spain with French influence. Oh, no, no, no. On my mother's side, definitely African roots. Beautiful. Definitely native roots. Beautiful. And definitely Anglo-Saxon roots. Beautiful. And on all the sides, there's distress and some ugliness. And who do I choose to be? I'm not any of that. I get to leverage all of it. It's part of the human experience. I'm not my name. I'm not my past. I'm not even my present. I am consciousness at my core. I'm energy at my core. I'm temporarily in this temple, having the opportunity to experience as much wonderful joy, happiness, and even trauma to understand what this thing called life is. I remember this guy that I was so infatuated with years ago. He was infatuated with me too. We didn't know what to do, so we didn't do anything. It was so funny. And the elders around were like, "Ah, nothing's going to happen because these two kids have no clue." And we weren't kids in the sense of being so young. I think we're both in our 40s, but who knows? And he says, "You must read. What is it? The Conversations with God." He says, Everything you talk about reminds me of those 3 series." I said, "Well, if I remind you and I don't need to read it." He said, "Just read it." And when I read it, it was so funny. I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting." And so it's kind of like reading the Torah. I haven't read the whole Torah or the whole Bible or the whole Quran or the Tao or Taoist principles. I know some of them, or the Buddhist, some of the beautiful conveyances. And I've read a lot of them, and I found me in all of them because truth is truth. And when you understand that at the core, we're more than these bodies, more than historic experiences, heck, we get to create experiences. And what are we? And that's why I led with the word creators. We're creators. Whether we're educators in the classroom, whether we are elected officials, we're constantly in the act of creation. In fact, we expect elected officials to create conditions through policies, through other means that enhance the nature of our humanity. They don't all choose to do that. And quite frankly, some of us don't really want that. We want what we want, and it may not be complementary to enhancing the nature of humanity. And I want to acknowledge those of you who are listening, whether you're checking us out through one of the television broadcast mediums or Facebook or LinkedIn Live or other means, YouTube. So Belta Fengjoy, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thank you for being here, and the many others. So I just want to remind you that we are much more than we think we are. And so I always go back, or we typically go back to this essence of who we are, to remember that we get to be who we choose to be in every moment. Yes, we're influenced. Yes, we're socialized. Yes, there's all kinds of things that happen to us. We get to shift, to learn anew, to leverage what we already know. And if it works, keep it. If it doesn't, change it. If it works to get you to freedom so that you continue to experience freedom because you're experiencing it now, keep it. If it doesn't, you get to shift not tomorrow. Get to ship now. You get to experience freedom now. Did someone tell Serena Williams that she couldn't freely engage the way she engaged on the tennis court? I'm sure. When she got out there, do you think she allowed that individual or those individuals or those messages, those memes to thwart her ability to be successful? Had she would not be the winningest tennis professional that we have, the GOAT. Wow. Remember Billie Jean King? So, the last winning performance to date, yesterday, if I got it correctly, 30th. Timing seems off for me. It just moves, it floats. And what is she saying? She herself, a tennis icon, tributed her after Serena's 24th major victory. Says, more than anyone else and against so many odds, for a child growing up in Compton, California, this 40-year-old just began her legacy. Yes, she won tennis in all the spaces, Australian Open, the Olympic Games, the US Open, Wimbledon. She did it, that and much more. Did you know that she's building schools, or she's already built schools, community centers, resource centers? Did you know that she launched a clothing line in 2018, jewelry line the subsequent year? That she's partnered with organizations to, in her own way, enhance humanity. I love one of the partnerships with focusing on helping moms embrace their own inner wild child. A new program with Pampers called Born to Be Wild. I love it. So she chose to retire. Emphasis on choosing. She didn't have to devote time to family and her own spiritual growth. So that's to be. And I'm hoping you're imagining different other women, other men, young and old, definitely elders, who chose to be in spite of. We are a trip as a species of humans. So much of what we do is seemingly absolutely stupid, unhealthy, and intentionally harmful. And for me, most of my life was like, how do I, in our own way, influence to get rid of all that nonsense? Of course, as I've gotten older, even though I intellectually knew this, I now experience it more fully. We need that nonsense in order to understand the big picture and our capacity. And yet, the degree to which we understand the full picture, remember the full picture, we can, as a species, eliminate that nonsense. Because if we don't, this planet doesn't need us. We need the planet. This universe doesn't need us per se. We need the universe, humbly speaking. So let's opt to understand that we get to be the essence of who we really are. There's something about Serena, definitely not perfect. No one is. Are you? You may be. I've not met you, not read about you, have yet to get the full hookup about you. If you're perfect, I'm speechless and I'm loving it. Yet most of us are on a journey as humans to get back to where we came from, I believe. And where we came from is pure knowing, pure love, unconditional, purity. Here we get to get dirty, get ridiculous, get whatever. It allows us to feel more deeply, think more clearly, and act hopefully more responsibly and accordingly. And so that's the next type of freedom, is to do. So the first is to be, the next is to do. To feel, think, act without hindrance or restraints or constraint. The third type of freedom is freedom from something external. So it's a state of not being imprisoned or enslaved, for example. So my question is, are you captive physically? Are you unable to exercise choice? Your freedom of movement, is it limited? I'm reminded of Malcolm X, Maya Angelou, and so many others, and too many others, even now, who are in prison physically or imprisoned in their mind. And so there's so many names I can give you, different ethnicities, different genders, different place on the planet. And yet these folks at some point decided, I was imprisoned by a set of values. It led me to engage in a life of crime, Malcolm X. And then he realized there was something superordinate to that. So he was functioning at one level of vibration, and he allowed himself to access a higher level of vibration. And thanks to his wife and his children and the influences of everything that he chose to welcome in as he went elsewhere outside the US and into spaces where his brothers and sisters were those folks he thought were the devil, the enemy. And he realized, no, there's another level of vibration I can function at. And so he went higher, and the higher he went, the more open he became. Wow. He lived that spiritual journey where if we study him, we get to understand the power of each one of us. Maya Angelou did the same thing. And thank goodness, a lot of her story, she made certain was lived in front of us. She put it in writing. She did much more. I know why the cage bird sings. Wow. So she chose to turn off her voice. Choice. Because she believed that voice was powerful, and she was 100% right. And then she chose to turn it on and to use that voice in its powerful way for great good. And she did. And she was who she was. She be. She did stuff that she herself says, it was a lived experience. I wouldn't recommend other women do that. Or it was a great experience. I would recommend everyone do that. She was thoughtful. She was conscious at the subconscious level. She didn't just allow her body to just react and react. She decided to respond. Oh, and the genius that came out of her spirit, because she allowed herself to access the greatness that's embedded in each one of us, without exception. Each one of us. So these and so many other examples reveal the power of each one of us to leverage our mind to shift conditions to favorable ones, for us to give voice, for those favorable ones to give our voices real power, but more importantly, for us to give voice to the power that we already had. Faith is powerful, folks. Please remember that. And true faith, from my humble perspective, I mean, that's unwavering, is unconditional love. It comes from that source. It is that source. And the opposite of that is fear. So when you find yourself being told, as I've been told almost weekly, and I just heard it last night, it was like, no, night before last, a wonderful young man. I don't think he's 30 years old. He's going to have twins soon. Beautiful. And he's telling me about the catastrophe that's happening in a particular area. And I'm listening. And I'm listening. And in my head, it's like, this is not anything you want to hear that honor him. So I'm listening. And then he says to me adamantly, because clearly I didn't know those things. He says, "You need to get this app. You need to know these negative things. You need to know what's happening. That's da, 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 da." And then, in hopefully a loving way, definitely in a firm way, I leaned in and I said to this beautiful young man, I said, "No, I do not." I said, "There was a time where I took the New York Times, the San Jose Mercury News, the LA Times. I was on top of whatever was printed before the internet. I knew as much as possible. And not only did the ink affect my breathing, but more importantly, my mind, my thinking, my feelings were just, I felt like my body was restricting. I could barely breathe and I was not focused on good things. And it was just, my wiring to see the good was transforming. And I realized, oh my gosh, something's happening to me. So I eliminated all of those influences, opting to access those influences, because that's what they are, when I chose to. No more than once a week. I had to wean myself off of them because I was addicted to that type of news. And then all of a sudden, within a month, it was like the vista was open. I could see it. I was relieved. I was open. I was, it was surreal. I was happy again. Not happy in that I was jumping up and down and doing any kind of kumbaya moment, but my thought, my thinking was clear. I was focused on movement. I was focused on being of service, of adding value. Before I was retrenching. It's like, why am I here? What am I doing? Because, everything's doom and gloom. And then I stopped the noise. It's about choosing. Stuff happens. Conditions are real. You can make them more favorable based upon, each one of us can make them more favorable based upon what we think. Yes, we can be bombarded with the noise around us, but we can choose to exercise our power to turn down those noises. If we have to physically be present for whatever reason, because we're constrained, we can replace those noises with something else in our head. We can sing to ourselves. We can bring in things that edify and cause our vibration to go up. So many things in this environment cause our vibration to go down. Let me tell you, that is not by accident. Literally. There's an intentional focus by so many of us to bring up the level of vibration. Because with that, we remember who we are, and oh my goodness, the being actualizes. When we forget who we are, the fear takes over, the vibration gets lower, and things happen, and we're open to anything. When our vibration goes up, we are only open to that edifies our spirit and those we love and those we're trying to influence. And let me be very clear. I understand that I'm not an isolate. I'm not an island. I need every one of you. That's why I'm here. We need each one of us. That's why we're all here. I don't care that X or Y. What I care about is that we are a collective, even when we forget. And the degree to which you're doing things that are healthy adds value. Wherever you're at on the planet, it adds value to me, even if I never get to know your particular contributions. When you make a difference and a healthy difference in the lives of, you fill in the blank, an elder who's in elder care, a person walking across the street who just can't see, but knows how to maneuver, but just something's off that day. And you jump in to help. We all benefit from that. Not just because that person will likely pay it forward, who is on the receiving end, because life itself, you've created an energy, a momentum that elevates the level of vibration for all of us. So we recommend devoting more time to to be, because that is from where all freedom comes really. It's an internal experience primarily. Yes, external events and other realities inform, encourage, dissuade, particular directions, positions, or even more. And it is always our reaction or response that determines our outcomes internally and externally. So we could react out of fear. Oh my God, I got to find out what else is going on that may harm, may harm, may harm, may harm, may harm. Or respond, what do I need to create that facilitates greater well-being? Not only internally for me as one human being, the rest of us in this life, because we are one, even when we're so busy trying to tear some of us down. And I humbly believe part of the reason why we try to tear some of us down is because we're in distress and we don't remember who we are. And the lower the vibration, the more distress and the more disconnects. The higher vibration, I mean, literally, look at vibratory patterns. Check out, maybe there's a lot of stuff on YouTube. I don't know. I'll check. Where you can easily access scientists looking at levels of vibration. The higher the level, there's almost no gaps in the sound or the pattern. The lower the vibration, there's a lot of gaps, a lot of holes. Literally, not figuratively. And so when you interact with some people, it's like, they know me. Well, they're operating at a higher level of vibration so they could see you. Can you imagine each one of us really seeing the other, fully honoring the other, because we're choosing to operate at a higher level of vibration. We're choosing to be. So the next thing we're going to talk about next week, and there's so much more, and I thought we'd just be in and out in 20, 30 minutes. My apologies for those of you who took my word, because I did. But a source greater than me had more in line. We're going to talk about know your why as a precondition to getting to the place where you may want to be, which is freedom. There's a path. Yeah, there is a path. Next week, we're going to talk about know your why, and then how to learn your why if you don't have a why. So why are we talking about freedom again? We really want all of us to achieve it, and to achieve it not in maybe 15 lifetimes from now, but if possible, because of what you choose in one lifetime, in a couple of lifetimes, to get there, because we can. More on this next week. It's an honor to be here with you all. And thank you for choosing to listen. But more importantly, know that you can come here and as Belta, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, you can add your own story. You can add your own statements, your own thoughts, as often many of our viewers do. It's an honor. Wado.